What is up, guys? This is Infinite Flash here. Let's talk about what happened in Game 10 of the World Championship match between Carlsen and Anand. In this game, we've got Anand playing white and Carlsen playing black. And we start with the Grunfeld defense. And here comes the first interesting deviation of the match. Normally, Anand is probably even going for the main lines with that kind of stuff, or something solid with. I remember him playing Bishop D2, but the knight wasn't on F3 necessarily, so there's a lot of other solid setups with possibly E3 or Bishop F4 here. But Anand opts for one of the sharpest continuations you can find in the Grunfeld, Queen B3. And this move is very, very just leading to a super complicated play. Takes his main line with castles, E4, and this is being really one of the most complicated positions you can come in the Grunfeld. I think it's black's doing fine, although the play leads to like really sharp play. There are a few main moves, I think, if I remember correctly. Knight c6 and knight a6 are the main moves. Can't remember if bishop e6 was any good, but I know that Kasparov played knight a6, and this is what happened in this game. I mean, Kasparov played this in the early 1980s and 1990s. Had some great games with this game, with this line. Bishop e2, and now c5 to push the pawn that the knight is supporting here. Anand push d5, pretty much taking space, and after e6 castles, we get a very, very sharp position with an isolated pass pawn in the center. Very unclear play, really. Rook e8, and now bishop g5, developing that bishop to the active square. h6, bishop h3. Yeah, pretty much this is a very complicated position. It's hard to say what's going on. Yet the play has to be yet defined with the rooks in the center and black trying to gnaw away at the d5 pawn at some point. Oh, notice that you can't really play knight g4, probably because of the, I think, just bishop d2 protecting everything. And you'll eventually be able to kick this knight back and go back here, so it's not really a problem for the knight to go to g4 at all for white. So instead of that, he played bishop f5, and after this, Anand just developed the rook towards the center. And here Carlsen has to pretty much decided just to trade off one pair of minor pieces with knight e4. Notice that you don't want to really do knight g4 now, is because of just bishop g1, bishop c1, and there's no concrete threat in this position. Notice that if you take here, trying to uncover the defense of the bishop, just taking with the pawn gives white extremely good play. The bishop pair and black's just strategically just busted there. So we have to go knight e4 instead, from the f6 square. If my mouse wants to work, there we go. And in this position, Anand just decided to capture the knight. Yeah, and here Carlsen certainly could have taken the rook. He could have done that, certainly, and I think queen c1 is the only good move, really. Good queen square. I mean, the rook may swing across to b4 at some point if you go to some square like b3, so it doesn't really help for you to do that. And after queen c1, I think black would have played knight b4. We would have seen the pawn push here, and I don't know, black probably plays rook c8 or something, right? This is really, really unclear stuff. Very, very unclear stuff right here. Not sure what black does actually, but probably, I don't know, rook g4 doesn't look too outlandish. It looks very, very unclear. I think that would have been interesting to see. But the game is no slouch of interesting position either. Bishop b4 was played, and after this, Anand decided to bring the queen back to safety on c1, and pretty much indirectly supporting the pawn. Notice that you can't really capture here immediately because I'm capturing here. I'm playing queen c5, and you can't really defend the bishop anymore with this pin right over here along the d file. So knight e4, takes, queen c1, and now Carlsen plays a good move in queen f6 to counterattack this pawn. Anand decided to capture the pawn. That's one other move that queen c1 did, is to apply pressure here, and Carlsen wants to play actively himself. Queen b2 was played by Carlsen, and yeah, and here I think an interesting spot is that I think Anand could have captured the bishop here on g7, and after this long series of trades with takes, I think only white can be better, but it's really not that much after a move like that. The pawn on d5 is extremely weak, and it doesn't really help that you have a really, really weak knight here on f3, so black should really be perfectly fine there. Instead, we saw the captures on b2 instead of the captures on g7. And we just saw the queen trade right there, and knight g5 getting a tempo on the bishop. Carlsen just really didn't care. He just cares about this really strong bishop supported by this c5 pawn. That's an eternal bishop right there. And after this, I think that we pretty much get a few trades, and even though the white has the bishop pair, it seems that the pawn is well blockaded. All these moves look pretty reasonable to me. Bishop f4 to support the pawn on d6, knight b4 to pretty much bring the knight back at some point to anchor this bishop, and we pretty much saw a little bit of maneuvering here with rook d2, trying to slowly build some pressure, possibly with bishop e3 at some point, or perhaps play a3 and try to swing one of the rooks, having some flexibility to possibly double on one of those files with either rooks. Rook e8, trying to take the open file. Rook c1, gaining just a little bit of pressure on the position. Rook e6, trying to round up that pawn later on if you can. h4, pretty much a space gaining move. I'm not really sure. I guess it's just a waiting move for now. Bishop e5. Yeah, and here the pawn is really just hanging, so he's got to take, and bishop takes b7 is a nice kind of motif to remember. I should also mention that certainly a3 was on here. One kind of idea in this kind of position was that if black decides to play knight e6, this is actually a blunder due to bishop b7. Attacking the knight, and if you take, I'm promoting the pawn already, and you have to give back the rook, and this is a lost position. So you've actually got to play knight c6 in this position, but white would just captures and probably play this position when white's minimally preferable, but it's really nothing at all for white. So instead of a3, we saw bishop takes b7, and the thing is, this is pretty much leading to an unfortunate draw. I would have liked to see a decisive result today, but it just really did not happen at all. So very, very understandable draw by white here. In fact, they agreed to a draw here on move 32. I would have continued playing, but I don't think I would have that confidence, as either color really. Rook c1 and probably rook c4 to blockade that pawn. Not really clear how either side makes progress. Maybe white can bring the king over with that kind of stuff, and the king up there, and try to round up the pawn slowly. Somehow get to the e5 pawn. I don't know. Place the rook on d5 or something. It really doesn't matter. Looks pretty drawish really, and black has the passed pawn, and you don't. So I would have. I don't know. I would have continued for either side. Seems like for those guys, it's definitely a draw. But okay. Anyways, a well-played draw. I think it was a fair struggle, and I think Carlsen pretty much played this pretty well. In the end, so that's pretty fair to say, I think. Well, anyways, guys, I'll be covering Game 11 on in a couple days when it comes out. I know this wasn't that so exciting, but I thought the opening was pretty interesting, as the position could have easily blown up into a much sharper fight if one of the players allowed one of those crazier lines. I know there's like a 3-piece for a queen and 2 pawn queen sack line. That's absolutely crazy. So I was hoping for that too, but it didn't happen. But still, it looks like a fun game, and I'm glad to see this kind of stuff. See you around, guys.